Hello everybody, Stephen Hesse here to do another Hesse vlog with a difference because this time round I'm actually going to do a sort of serious subject vlog about something that's been sort of bothering me for a while now, and that I feel I should share more, and the sort of to talk about the sort of value of sharing and how important it is. And I hope me sort of telling my story where you can actually see me talking about it has the impact that I know me since I've started talking about it in the last year or so, that it seems to have made a difference to several people, which means the world to me, and I believe that that is the most important thing I can do, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to go full, and one of the things that's happened is actually it's went full circle, which I'll explain about that in a moment. But one of what I'm referring at is I wanted to talk more about my manic depression because it's something obviously that's affected me my entire life. And one of the things that makes me want to talk about it more is the current sort of feelings I've had and frustrations I've had with a lot of things that's been building up over the last couple of months, which I think sort of sums up how difficult my situation is and how difficult life can be sometimes. But I suppose the best place to start is this is in relation to a blog post I wrote last year, which was one of the times I first actually started talking about it, and I actually talked about it on local radio, because I seen a blog post on the devil's software that I like to call it, Facebook, where my friend, who will remain nameless because she might not want me to mention it, wrote a sort of an update basically talking about how she felt really vulnerable and worthless and felt like she couldn't sort of carry on, as it were, but she didn't mean it, and she didn't sort of mean it in that sense. But I basically read it and seen the sort of depressive tendencies that were in what she was writing. So it made me sort of think about all sorts of different things. Really, it made me think about my situation, and it made me think about what I can do to help her, really, because obviously I didn't want her to feel that way. But it sort of made me look inside myself and realize there was a couple of things that I was sort of letting slip. I was not sort of being upfront with my battle in the past, and I was not really I wasn't really sort of looking at it full in the face, and actually admitting it to other people, because up until that point there was probably people with one hand who have actually heard me privately talk about how difficult my struggles have been. And I've sort of hit the realization through that blog post that I've not felt like I wasn't doing enough. And also I wasn't giving myself enough credit for the fact that when I'd wrote the blog post and realized that I'd realized that it's been 8 years. 8 years since I found out I was manic depressive, and 10 years since I was known to be depressed. Which I'll get to the reason why it took a while to be diagnosed, which is another important point. And so it's an amalgamation of that I needed to pat myself on the back more, but I also needed to do more for people who need the help, and also to let people be aware of how difficult things can get. Because I think it's still a taboo subject, and when you hear someone say something along the lines of depression and say that word, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, no, you can't say that dreaded word, because it's still, for whatever reason, people feel the need that it's not the right thing to talk about, which is another thing that I want to touch on. But what I was referring to in the fact that the last couple of months has made me sort of kick me up the arse to do this, is that just I think the last 2 months realize like underline how difficult sort of things are for me with my illness, because the last couple of months have been difficult for me personally, but also been very sort of good for me in a business sense. That we obviously, so people who may know me and what we do, is that we did the Geek Festival, which really did well, and I'm really sort of proud of it. But I suppose to convey how difficult my mind was at the time, that I remember finishing Geek Fest, and after organising it, and it did really well, to not feeling satisfied. I actually reached the point before it was happening that I wanted it to be over, and not in a good way. I just wasn't I wasn't coping with everything that was going on, which shows you what kind of mindset I was in. And also, my friend Gareth passed away due to heart failure, and that floored me. And I don't mean to suggest that I knew him very well, but he was someone I liked and I admired for the fact that he never complained about things as much as he probably, quite rightly should have done, because he basically had a replacement heart and was fine, was in pain, seemed to be in pain an awful lot of the time, and obviously struggled towards the end of his life. And that, coupled with my mum having a cancer scare, has led the situation in my house to be that she's leaning on me for emotional support. Now, the thing that the context that needs to be provided is, about 2 weeks before that, I was feeling really run down. I like run down in a mental sense. My body was fine, but my mental capacity was really low. I was struggling to the point where I wasn't getting out of bed, and I was getting no sort of positive stimulation from anything that I was doing, and that was obviously a problem. So that kind of underlines that I was expecting it to get worse, and it ended up being that. It has been consistently getting more difficult to keep going. But I guess the point I'm making is the terrible side. One of the sides of someone who you spend every day with, going through a difficult scenario, is you have to make the decision of not sort of leaning on them for what you need, for what you need to happen, because she's going. But what I find interesting, and I think is a really key thing about underlining my mom's situation, is she has a physical situation, so you can help someone who has a physical ailment, because if she's struggling to do a certain thing, you help her because you can see that that person is struggling. Whereas someone like me who has a mental illness, a mental health problem, it's not treated the same way, and I find that interesting, and it also kind of, to me, underlines that people are in it's a really difficult thing to want to help someone. But that's half the reason that I want to talk about my difficulties with it, to show what you can do, and what I think a lot of people make a mistake of, through my experience of trying to help someone who is like me. Because one of the things I think anyone who's had depression who'll understand why I'm saying this is, we don't want to be depressed, and we can't help it because it's a chemical imbalance in my brain, and it's something we have. We all have flaws, and ours just has to be a more debilitating flaw than most, and we want to feel better. And I think the response that everyone usually gives you, which doesn't, believe me, does not help, is to say, just feel better. And it's like, well, if we fucking felt better, we wouldn't have an issue, wouldn't we? If we had the ability to make a switch and go, yeah, we're going to feel better. Because when somebody's depressed, they don't have the energy to even get up, never mind having the energy to tell someone how they feel about something they're feeling every single second of every day. Because that's what depression feels like. It is a really difficult thing to get over, and as I've said, over the years that I've had it, is I've managed to gain certain techniques that help me, but ultimately my brain decides how I'm gonna feel, and I felt terrible for the majority of the last couple of months, for most of this year pretty much, because obviously the personal stuff doesn't help, but if you looked at the scale of what's happened to me over the last couple of months, there's been obviously really bad things happened, but I can cope with that, and I can cope with the successes as well. But the thing that's the consistency throughout, it's not a emotion that comes from doing something successful, is this dread of not feeling worthy, and not feeling important, and not feeling that not feeling valuable, and not getting the help that I need for whatever reason. So I hope just me sort of talking about it now lets people have a better sort of mindset about it, and also help someone who feels that way. Because I suppose the best thing to tell you is how I found out about how I got to know that I had depression in the first place. Because um, one of the things that happened was I was starting to not enjoy being around people. I just thought it was a teenage spat, and everyone assumed it was, to the point where I thought that's exactly what it was as well, and I was just a horrible person, and I was just struggling to not cope with things. And so my solution to that was to stop hanging out with people I cared about. Now they thought it was just a huff and a spat, but it was a huff and a spat that lasted a long time. And it was because I was miserable. I generally would wake up and I would look at everything and like watch stuff that I would always watch, and play guitar, and do all the things that on a normal day, and I use quotations, on a normal day would stimulate me just as efficiently as anything else. But they were not working, and I was stuck in this pattern. This pattern that I thought was just I'm not capable of getting over. And there was one particular incident when I walked into a history lesson, and I absolutely loved history, like really thought the world of it. And then I walked in and I started crying, like uncontrollably. Like when I say uncontrollably, I don't mean a little small tear and it's like, oh, it's just like the Mask of Zorro or something, just like, well, just don't look at me. I mean, I just mean literally I couldn't stop. So everybody was looking at me, and I remember thinking, my dirty secret is out. People now know that I'm not coping. So I did the best thing I could as I excused myself from the class and walked out. Now the reason this is a really key situation is I had two decisions to make. I think I was roughly about 15 at the time as well, if anyone wants to know what age I was. Is I walked out of the classroom and I had a really important decision. Do I leave the school, or do I do what I told the teacher and go and tell someone I was ill? But they obviously thought, the first thing they said when they say they're ill, which is another interesting point, is that they think it's a physical one. They think you're ill physically, not mentally. And the reason that the context that I've deliberately left out is important is I did not want to be in that lesson, but I also did not want to be in that school. I didn't want to be in that town. I didn't want to be in this country. I did not want to be on this planet. I just hated everything. And that's what I think my body was telling me, is I was walking into a lesson that I normally love, and I wanted to be anywhere else but there. And for whatever reason, and I'd love to wish I could tell you the magic formula for me ending up thinking this, is I ended up listening to my good voice in my head who said, maybe you should tell someone. And I don't know whether it was a combination of just me not having the energy to argue, or my depression having the energy to argue, is I listened, and I went up a flight of stairs, still crying, and went to my form tutor. And I ran into the classroom. Luckily, she had a free lesson, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and obviously, first thing she said is, "Why are you crying?" And I said something up to that point that was the most honest sentence I'd ever said. Is I looked at her and said, I just can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I'm crying all the time, and I can't stop it, and I just can't do this on my own anymore. And she looked at me, and because I said, I was crying all the time, she looked back at me and said, "What do you mean all the time? How long has this been going on?" And I said, "As long as I can remember." And that is what I like to call the sort of alarm clock. The alarm bell sentence of, that's not great. And she said something to me that I'd never even considered up to that point. Because she turned to me and said, Stephen, that's not normal. For the first time ever, I actually generally looked in my head and said, really, it's not normal? I'd never even considered that because, like I said earlier, I thought I was just being an angry teenager. I didn't know what I had. So she did the best thing she could as she gave me an emergency appointment and I went to my doctor. And now I made a clear, critical mistake here, but which I take some responsibility for. But you've got to bear in mind, I'd been faking it and hiding this for as long as I can remember. You know, it wasn't as strong as I was growing up, you know, before I was 10, but I was noticing it was there, but I didn't know what it was. And it was getting more and more frequent as I got older. So you got to bear in mind that every time I had this situation, I was avoiding talking about it and I was avoiding letting people be aware that I was like that. So I walked into my doctor's and said to him, I'm just feeling a little down, you know, just things aren't going well. And so the reason that, and I don't know if you know anyone that's like this, but you know, I really hate when people say half truths and half lies. It's like, there's no such thing. That's a lie. It's a lie. You know, there's no such thing. You know, I lied. I didn't half lie or half tell the truth. I lied. So anyone who tells you that, they're lying. So I lied because I didn't tell him the truth. I didn't tell him the fact what I'd told my teacher earlier, that I was feeling like this all the time. Like I say, I'd had enough time during the time of her taking me to the doctor's for an emergency appointment that she turned around, and I had enough time to turn myself around to go back to my habit of, I'll just tell them what they need to know, or what I think they need to know. Probably is a more honest way of saying it. So fast forward to university, and I actually got special dispensation in sixth form to go to university because I was struggling. Not very many people know that. And I'd reached the point where I couldn't actually hold up a pen because I was so disinterested in life, really. People thought it was academically, but you've got to bear in mind I was doing 4 A-levels at the time, and I was really academic minded. I enjoyed doing the school stuff, so I went from someone who really enjoyed doing it to not giving a crap. And obviously that's bad, but again, people looked at it with a degree of, yeah, he's depressed, but he's depressed about something else, or he's depressed about failing. Because I remember during that period of time that my teachers were tarring me with a brush on that he just wasn't engaged in the stuff. He was bored. But I was bored for an entirely different reason, as I just couldn't engage. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. But anyway, I go to university, and the first year is actually alright. I kind of cope okay. At least for the first 6 months. I did what anyone else would do at university, is I enjoyed myself and, tried to fail the first year as much as possible. But as you're probably not surprised to hear, as I'm going through this, I started getting worse. And and it reached the point where I started gaining bad habits. I would start drinking more than I should, way more than I should, and mixing with my medication prescription drugs, because I would take whatever I could to not feel the way that I felt. I was self-medicating essentially, which was not a good idea. So I was getting worse and worse and worse to the point when I got to the first year of uni, I got, again, a special deadline extension because I was struggling to do anything, and I was so confused about everything, and I was so annoyed at myself that I wasn't getting better. It was a stopgap, like a lot of people who end up on regular medication do. It's a stopgap essentially. because no one was realizing that there was a problem inside me that needed to be dealt with. It was something that was affecting me all the time. It wasn't a quick fix. Obviously, I didn't know that, and I'm an element of not telling people the truth. But you have to remember the scare factor. If you feel like that all the time, like I have the last couple of months, that I just do not feel involved, and I don't feel like I mean anything. I mean, how strong that is, and imagine how difficult that is all the time. That, like today, one of the reasons why I don't have a emotional feeling at the minute is because I'm tired. I haven't slept well in ages because my brain's overactive. My brain's thinking too much about everything, and I'm struggling to keep it under control. And I need people around me. I need the positive. I need people to be as positive as I know I can be. And I need to feel like what I'm doing is worth something, because all the hard work I've done with Geek Apocalypse, for example, I'm so happy. I generally think if I had the mindset, I would be really over the moon with how it's went. But part of me has been thinking that it doesn't really mean anything unless I get to share with people who mean something to me. And it always makes a difference to have someone going, look, I really want you to do well, because I care that you're happy. I want you to be happy. I want you to be doing the things you want to do. Because I say that to everybody I know. And I think they'll know this if they see this, that they'll look at it and go, yeah, he's someone who really wants people to do well. I mean, I've been called the most selfless person. There's several people have said that I'm the most selfless person they know. But I always want to say in response to that it doesn't mean anything it doesn't mean much when I feel like I'm not getting as much of it back as I would like. And that really is the crux of it. So I go back to when I was at university. I started smoking, like I say, started getting a drinking habit, and started mixing drugs and stuff. And I started having manic episodes, essentially. Didn't find that out till later, obviously. But I started having manic episodes, and then I went into my room that we're currently in now, actually, which I only just noticed this, that actually this is where it happened. And luckily it was the generation when MSN Messenger was around, and a friend of mine from university started talking to me while I was on the internet trying to find ways to have the willpower to end my life. Sad, but completely true. And I felt like that for a long time. So it wasn't necessarily a cry for help. I really was just giving myself the will to not feel the way I felt. And all the sort of self-medication I was taking obviously didn't help and was not making me feel any better. It stopped working. So she starts talking to me, and through her telling me this after, I start talking absolute gibberish in a sort of Shakespearean tone and not really responding to anything that she was saying. Because I was gone, really. So she had a decision to make herself, which I always can't believe to this day, really, but she's a nice human being. Is that she had a decision to either ignore me or do something about it. But because we were good enough friends before that, she'd seen me in certain situations where she knew that I wasn't being myself. And this was something I was going through. The turmoil I was going through was real, but it was not really essentially who I was. And I needed help. So she rang the police and then the ambulance. And I remember thinking this, and I just think it sums up my sort of my feelings at the time, is that it really just I remember my mum getting back from being out on a night out, and I remember just thinking, I don't want to disrupt her from that. I don't know why I sort of thought that, because of all the sort of stuff I was doing, that then I was like, make sure we don't ring. But again, it was an element of, I didn't want her to find out what I went through. I felt ashamed, basically. So I decided to sort of wait outside, and I was trying to think of a way to get them to leave. Generally, that's what I thought. So the police came. They rugby tackled me, because I think I had a knife during this whole time. Not a knife as in, I think, I really do think it was just like I had a knife in my room, like I'd cut a sandwich earlier that day. But they rugby tackled me to the ground, and then handcuffed me and put me in the ambulance. And now the ambulance were kind of like, oh, another teenager, again the sort of stereotypical, another teenager doing something stupid. And then the police informed them what my friend had told them on the phone, and then they realised it was a completely different thing. So they took me to the ambulance, and then took me to the hospital, rather, to a psychiatry ward. Now, I've never been in a psychiatry ward. I don't remember much about going in, with it being, this was about 1 o'clock in the morning, by the way, as well. And so I went into the psychiatry ward, and it had two chairs in a sort of mirrored wall. And I sat down, and they said, "We'll see you in a couple of hours." Oh well, I'm sorry, not a couple of hours. Like there'll be a couple of guys to come and see you in a bit. So just sit there and we'll be right back. And it obviously the room had nothing in for me to harm myself. And I remember looking at the mirror, and I again don't know where this came from. And there'll be some people probably who, if they do view this, who'll be thinking it's, sort of God, maybe a God element, but I generally do not believe that. But for whatever reason, I remember a voice inside my head saying, Stephen, this always makes me cry, that how sad it is that he had to say this, but, Stephen, you've never laughed in such a long time. And I don't mean just a little laugh. I mean really, really laughed with people you want to laugh with. And that floored me, because that was completely true. And for whatever reason I did this, and anyone who knows me who's watching this is going, this is totally Stephen's sense of humour. Is I got up and I looked in the mirror and I started pretending I was in CSI. So I was looking at the mirror going like, you'll never take me alive, Kappa, you'll never take me alive. And I just laughed, because it sounds crazy, and actually if you look at it from the perspective of them, if anyone was watching me, they'd be like, he's in the right place, he's clearly crazy. But it pleases me to say that I knew that wasn't me being crazy, that was me being me. And I remember telling myself, congratulations, you found your sense of humour. And I swear to you that one little bit saved me for the rest of the process of getting better, because suddenly I wanted to tell them everything I'd went through. So I went to, when the doctors came in, specialist doctors dealing this kind of thing, came in and talked to me about why they asked me why I thought I was there, and I told them everything I'd felt, all up to that point. Just how miserable I was and how I wasn't coping, and I just was like, I occasionally I'd have these complete bursts of rage, and I just was just so, I just did not feel connected to anything. And after sort of me talking for about half an hour, like sort of ironically, while we're here half an hour me talking now, is they turned to me and said, how do you know, like, all this? Like, you know it all. Like, not all of it, but you know so much about it. that you don't even realise. And I was sort of baffled by that because I didn't think I knew anything. And I just said, like I said to the teacher before, is that, well, I've been dealing with this as long as I can remember. And so really, in a nutshell, what that story tells you is, I knew what I was going through. I just needed someone to tell me that it wasn't my fault and that it is an illness. It was not me being a bad person, because anyone who knows me, I hope, because I would do the same to anyone I know, because there's a reason they're in my life, is that I would not hurt anyone, and I would try my hardest to treat people the right way, because it means everything to me to be treated the right way and to be cared enough that people want me around. They don't want to wait for the phone to ring. They want to ring me. And that's a part of it that I miss. So after a long I was put on suicide watch. And for those who don't know what that is that basically they have guys come around your house to make sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't be. And I went to specialist help, and then I found out through that about all the manic episodes I'd had. Because there's some I've not mentioned where I went, I would break stuff in my bedroom and do all sorts of crazy things, and it was like someone had turned the lights on. Like a light bulb went off in my head, because I'd suddenly realised that, when they described what manic depression was, I was like, that's definitely me. And the blog post I wrote made me realise that, I deserve the credit from that point, that I've tried to do the best life I can. And I really do try to help people to the best of my abilities. But I guess what I'm saying in regards to depression is that you sometimes can't try your hardest. And you do need more help than other people. And like I said at the beginning, depressed people would prefer they didn't need all this help. I'm quite a private person, but I've realised I'm gonna have to ask for help more often. But it's really hard as a depressed person to have the energy just to tell someone, look, I'm not feeling great and I need support. Because like I've been saying to some people, at least writing stuff recently that's on my mind, is that if you ask this question to yourself now and say, if you turn around to someone and say, look, I need you, not tomorrow, not next week, not arrange a time. I mean, I need you now. So can we please do something now? Even if it's just sitting there and being in each other's company. But I need someone to just be there to talk to me and stop me thinking about how difficult this whole thing is. And if you can ask that question to yourself and say, honestly, that you know someone who'll do that for you, then I really, really envy you. Really, honestly. And if the answer is no, then talk to me. Because I wanted to end this by saying, if this story doesn't tell you anything, it'll tell you the most important thing, that is, without people that I've known, and some people who didn't know me that well at the time, did not have the act of kindness that they did during my most vulnerable time of my life, where I was really close to ending my own life, that they didn't have that act of kindness and general care for other human beings and me as a human being, I would not be here telling you this story now. When I tell you that most people who suffer manic depression, don't make it to 30 most of the time, and there's a 75% chance that they won't live with it. It is a horrible thing to have. It can be one of the things I haven't mentioned though, can also be quite euphoric. But the problem I have, and I'm only speaking from my own personal experience with it, is that, it sometimes feels like you're waiting to be, to have that euphoric feeling. And waiting for it is the worst thing you can do. Because it is euphoric and it is the best drug you can have. But, like I say, it cannot lead you to be a very practical person if you're just hoping it'll turn up one day. Just as much as you're hoping one day that you don't feel the way you do. It doesn't work like that. And that's why sharing in this world is the most important thing ever. And hopefully if someone sees this and they're wondering why their friend hasn't rung, don't think it's because they don't love you. Don't think it's because they don't care about you. Maybe they actually need you to ring. Maybe they need you to be there for them. Because if they've been there for you before, they'll be there for you again. Because believe me, I've met enough people in my time, like I say with myself, this persona, is that a lot of people do end up abusing that. So, let's start sharing. Because to go back to the beginning of the story I said, of my friend putting the Facebook update, is that really what we want society to be now? Where someone puts it out in the ethos and wants someone to make a difference and someone to respond to a thing that could end up anywhere and some people might not read it? Or do we see these things and act on it responsibly and say, if I really care about this person, I'll make sure I'll make the time to help them? Because there's so many people that say to you, I don't have the time, or I don't know how to help a depressed person. And that's the easiest question I've ever asked, and I get asked that quite regularly now. And the simple thing is, just be there. Tell them they mean something. And don't fight a negative with a negative. Why do you feel this way? Why can't you just be better? It is not something that's a quick fix. And like I said about being envious about someone being there for you whenever, that if someone says to you, I'll be there for you no matter what, but if you sleep now, I'll be there when you wake up. That is the greatest thing you can give someone. So I suppose the best thing I'm saying is can we please share things and understand a bit more, and if you want to share things and you want to make a difference, please do. And I think the best thing that people forget is reassurance. Is, like I say, it's not a quick fix in that, yeah, I'll talk to him one day and it'll be fine. I'll talk to her one day and it'll be fine. I'll talk to that kid one day and it'll be fine. Sometimes we just need to know that we're loved and that it's going to get better. I suppose the best way to end is say, it's good to be alive, and I hope if you're one of these people that listens to my story and is feeling the way they're feeling, get help and talk to me if you want. And if you're someone who knows this and is a friend of mine or a friend of anyone who knows someone who feels this way, I hope you like them and care enough about them that this makes you understand a bit more what you need to help them. Because it is hard, but the fact I'm talking to you now means you can beat it. So good luck, and I hope you get what you need. Thanks guys for listening.